Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is my favourite book of all time, and Cubicle 7 have just announced another expansion that is available for pre-order, Lords of Stone and Steel. This is a dwarf expansion. So a month ago we had the Dwarven Player's Guide, and so yeah, this has been followed up by a sort of more of an adventure written book for playing dwarfs. Is it any good? Am I glad that I got it? So I pre-ordered it, and then instantly when you pre-order it, you do get a link to go and download it from Dwarf-RPG. So there's a couple of places you can order the book from here. So we've got the Cubicle 7 website, which I'll put the link into the video, and I'll use the Drive-Thru-RPG link. So if you want to pre-order a physical copy in the UK, it's $34.99. It's available from Q4 2025. However, if you do pre-order it, they will give you a download code, and you can instantly get a copy on Drive-Thru-RPG, which is what I'm going to look at today. If you want to just pick up the copy direct from Drive-Thru-RPG, you can, and I'll put my affiliate link in the description for that as well. And obviously, if you use that, it does help me just put towards buying more books like this that I can then cover on the channel. The link here on Cubicle 7's website just gives you an idea of the artwork. We'll look at the book together and go through it, and then I'll give you my final thoughts. Okay, one thing Cubicle 7 doesn't do, and it does annoy me somewhat, is when you get a PDF copy, you never actually get the back cover of the book included, which is annoying, shall we say. So to look at what's included, we'll use the the Cubicle 7 site here. So it's going to be a guide to Kazakh Angkor, so the everlasting realms of the dwarves. There are important patrons here. So we've got, there's more than 3, but it does list 3 of them, which we'll come on to when we go into the book. New downtime events and endeavours. Ideal for theming adventures around dwarfs, including, I reckon there's probably it's going to be around about at least 100 adventure ideas, and there's actually there's an adventure right at the back of the book as well. I'll touch on them as I go through, but what I won't do is just spoil, especially the last adventure. I'll give you an idea of what's going on. There's new rules for fighting underground, and for things like worrying about cave-ins and stuff like that. There is a war party here for Skaven, for the clan Morbidius. And then we've got a detailed guide, which is amazingly detailed guide of Karak Norn. And it does say here, obviously, if you do buy this, you are going to need a copy of the Warhammer Fantasy Role-Playing rules. Right then, let's just get into the main rule book. And here we have the amazing front cover. The artwork for everything that comes out in 4th edition is utterly amazing. So we've got your dwarfs here fighting Skaven, who may or may not exist if you're playing the Enemy Within campaign. Bit of a spoiler, this seems to show that they do exist. The book itself comes in at 96 pages, so it's on the shorter side. So the dwarf guide was 146, around there, so it is a little bit shorter, but this is the normal size books that you get, like the archive books and things like that. They always come around about sort of 93, 95 pages, somewhere there, so that just give you an idea of what's included in the book. So here's the credits of the book. So developed and designed by Dave Allen, Christopher Coulson and Dominic McDowell, as well as other writers and editors and stuff are here. As ever, with the start of a book, you do just jump straight into contents. And the good thing is Cubicle 7, they have hyperlinked some of this, most of the book is hyperlinked, which is always good because it will just jump you through to where you need to be nice and quickly. But it's broken down into 6 chapters. So we've got Kazakh Angkor, which is the ancient empire of the dwarfs. So this just details a little bit more about dwarf society, hierarchies and things. We've then got Karak Norn, which is the largest hold in Grey Mountains, which is approximately a quarter of the book. So this is a huge part of the book. But then getting into chapter 3, so adventuring underground, so a detailed guide to delving through the underworld, so that's travelling between individual places, and some new rules for combat. Then the rest of the book is adventure ideas and campaign ideas, which covers about the last sort of 35 pages of the book. So there's a lot in here, lots of plot build up, lots of ideas of starting adventures and places to put adventures, and then it's a few new rules, and then a lot of adventure, and then sort of mini sort of campaign ideas, as well as or I'd say pretty much complete adventure right at the back of the book. First chapter, so Kazakh Angkor, so this just details, say, a little bit of the history of the dwarfs being in the World Edge Mountains, which is sort of where they started over the years. And then it just gets into dwarf kings and titles. So there's only ever one dwarf king, and his sons will then take over. So it's an hereditary title. And there's a little subsection here about dwarf queens. They do have queens in dwarfs, only if all the men are gone. So it's not a standard thing that happens. It's predominantly you will have male kings because their sons take over, and then anyone else, there is no real sort of titles for dwarfs other than this sort of Thane title, which basically covers, it's partly to do with age and, you know, your sort of how well you are revered in dwarven society. The king pretty much owns everything. So the more important you are, the wealthier you are, the more lands you own, and then everything else is pretty much just leased back down into the dwarven society. We're then going to get straight into the High King, which is he's the ultimate king that has been around for several hundred years. And it just details a little bit about his background, his motivation, short-term and long-term ambition. So if you are going to use him, you can kind of easily work out, you know, where the sort of adventures, actually it covers it later on in the book as well, so it's a little bit more detailed. Like Cubicle 7's book, they have all these hooks here, so this is just another adventure idea that Thorgrim is going to get them on. If you want his stats, hopefully you won't need his stats, but if you need them, they are here, as well as some incredibly useful and powerful magical items that you might not want to tell the players about, because if you've got players like maybe one of mine, they might go, "Ooh, I quite like the idea of some of these magical items." I suppose you know, as a games master, you could create a similar item to sort of gift out from players, but you might not want to encourage the players to go and steal items from the High King. We're then into details about the Council of Elders and how they work, and the royal clan roles within here, as well as details of one of the high priestesses down here and the prince. The next section is more about the Dwarven holds, and towards the end of this, there's a really interesting part. So dwarf holds are basically dwarven castles, technically, but underground. Okay, so that's all you really think of when you see the word hold. We then got one of the kings, so this is like an under king, because obviously you've got the High King, and then the different areas will have their own kings, but they still report to the main king. But here's Cazador Thunderhorn, so his motivation is his family, so he's, again, short-term and long-term ambitions, as well as adventure hooks. All of his stats in here. And then more magical items that, again, you shouldn't tell your player about. And then the third king is the interesting one, because I think if you're a fan of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and you probably, well, you'll be aware of the Slayer career. And what I like about this king is they are a family descended from a Slayer that became a king that then didn't fulfill his honor when he died, and then so obviously his sons have got this really weird place where they need to be, where they need to still look after the hold and run everything and protect all the people, but then still die in an honorific way to redeem themselves, unlike this is his grandfather we're on to now did. So yeah, it makes for a really interesting king and encounters if you can manage to get this into your players. Okay, we are then looking at different holds throughout the kingdom, well, the worlds, I should say, of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, and say we're going to get on, so different ones in the Blackhold Mountains. We then get this just terrible map, Cubicle 7. I don't know what you've done here. So firstly, it's the wrong way, so you're going to have to sort of twist your book around, which it's not the worst thing to come out, you know, having to turn a book sideways. I don't want to sound like that person that can't turn a book round. But when you look at this, especially once you get into the holds in the mountains, you can't even read them. They've done this, written the names within the mountain ranges itself here towards the, you know, this is the whole of the the World's Edge Mountains here. So it gives you an idea of all the holds, those that are active, those that are, have been lost as well. So we've got a key up in the top left-hand corner. But I don't know whether it's just me, but even on PDF, I think this is a struggle to read. And hopefully they will change. I don't know whether they can put a thicker border around the words in here, or I don't know. But I get what they're going for. It's just not, I don't think it's that usable. It's useful, but not usable. Then we've got the holds in the vaults, which again is another mountain range, holds in the Grey Mountains. And each of these holds will have details of, well, we're going to come on to that in a little bit, of, who runs it, the population, and things that they create. And then the best section, I really like this one, is the Lost Holds, which just details, I think, is it 10? Yes, we've got 10 holds that are, so these are historical holds that are in different areas of the world that the dwarfs have lost. And not lost as in they don't know where they are, they've just been taken over by goblins. This one over here has been overtaken by dragons, and we've got the stats for dragons coming up, so it's absolutely fine. And I just like the thought of, a bit like The Hobbit, getting players together to go and try and gain a hold back. You're not going to want to do that as starting level characters, or not level, but experience level characters. So it's something that you could build for. But I like the fact it's included. Okay, we've got this Gazier here as well on the right hand side, and this is what I was saying about all the holds. So this details where the holds are. So we've got the World's Edge, Black Mountains, and the Grey Mountains and Norsca here. And it just details each of the holds, the name, the size, who the ruler is, the population, the wealth, any sort of things that it produces, so the things it manufactures. Then gives an idea of the garrison and militia that it can put together, as well as some notes that may come up that might be important. And it's got an awful lot in here. We're then into chapter 2, which is Karak Nord, so it's the largest of the Grey Mountains. And this the largest hold in the Grey Mountains, which, if you want to know where it is in here, it is here. Okay, so it's got a population of 20,000. It's not the largest, because I think there was one. So yeah, Karak has got 900,000, which obviously is the capital where the High King lives. But yeah, we're here in Karak Norm, which is in the Grey Mountains. Which, if you're running the enemy within campaign, because of where it's set, the Grey Mountains are very close, and they will go to the Grey Mountains. Slight spoiler at some stage. So this is probably why it's included in this book. But details here of, so all of the, well, not all of them, but an awful lot of the holds are sort of connected with underground tunnels, and some of it sort of overground as well. And it just details the map here, as well as some other holds that are in there. It details the sort of like traveling in between, which the new rules will come on to once we get into that book, and the threats to Karak Nord, so who's going to be attacking sort of all the orcs and goblin tribes that are locally around. We then get this amazing cross section of Karak Nord, broken down into 34 sort of areas, and it's really, really good. But I do have a little bit of a grumble about this. So it's got this wonderful key here, so from 1 to 34. However, as we go on, I'll scroll back, don't worry. But as we go on and look at the different areas, so like the Royal Hall, the King's Treasury, the Library of Karak Nord, what I'd like to see in here is the number that corresponds to the area of the map. Because I was doing an awful lot of reading about the areas, coming back to the map, and then having to go down to the key to try and work it out. I think personally it would have just made sense. Throw that number next to the sections. But so we're starting off at the Crossroads Inn, and one of the friendly face and one of the patrons here is Zilra. It is actually, and again, some more hooks for the adventuring parties to sort of, once they're there, to sort of send them out. Karak Nord is broken up into several sections, and it will take you through the different sections of the vault, but what it doesn't do, again, it would have been nice on this, I'll just scroll back to the map, is if it just maybe done a dotted line or something to show visually and nice and quickly just how, where each of the sections are. You can get it by reading through, but I think it's just a little bit of extra work that they could have just thrown in there. Got details of the king and his wife. There's a variety of NPCs in here, taking you through the royal chambers. It's really descriptive and really interesting, as well as some fantastic art that gives you an idea of what it looks like and the sort of feel. It looks all, I'd say, other than the smithy, and then we've got the main armourer here, the artisan, as well, with what I like about some of these NPCs is they have got their own personality. This guy is a little bit grumpy, kind of hates a lot of people. So it's quite good. And then we'll go further in to the temple itself as well, which again, you can work it out where it is, but I would have just liked something nice and simple, detailing, say, Baragor here, Gutsrasun, who is the sort of the main priest in there as well. And then we're going sort of deeper down. So it does flow, taking down into the mines and, through all the royal halls. And then we're finally into Underdeep, and then there's this castle here, which is it's the bottom end protector part. And then within the castle, we've got this really interesting character here, Catherine, is it Thorm's daughter, I think, who's another demon slayer. Always love seeing demon slayers in books, just for the players to sort of interact with, and maybe she's got a mission or two for the players. Section 3, or Chapter 3, is now going to take us into Adventuring Underground with some stage rules. Stages are when players are traveling underground, so it gives you an idea of how many stages it will take you to get. So just think of that as just it's an abstract round. So, if you're going to be fighting in a combat and it's 10 rounds, this equivalently would be 10 stages. And each of the stages will end up with a different role, which we'll come on to. But the first thing you're going to look at then is the conditions of the tunnels themselves. And depending on the area in general, how close you are to any of the holds, will determine whether it's sort of more likely to be patrolled or occupied or crumbling down, because obviously if you think most things nearer a dwarven hold are going to be sort of looked after, protected, cleaned up, that sort of thing, and maintained is the word that I'm looking for. Okay, like all of these Cubicle 7 books, it then just breaks it down with a bit of a descriptor then, as well as some game mechanic rules. Delving endeavours. This annoyed me, is using endeavours, because if you're a fan of the book, endeavours are what you do in your downtime, and this isn't that. And it actually covers this in the very first paragraph. It's going, this isn't the same sort of endeavours as the downtime endeavours. Well, then call it a different word. Don't use endeavours, because it's a little bit confusing. But this is like the stages, the delving stages. What this does is it gives the players something else they can do while the party is going through each of its delving stages. So it's something else abstracted that the players will do. So they can look for camps, make routes on a map, find water, keep watch, etc. So the other things they're doing, other than, because when you're doing your delve, I probably should have said, you've got one of the players is going to do a navigation test to make sure they are going the right way. So you just pick one, while the players pick one who's going to be sort of navigating them through. The rest of the players, so they don't feel like it's just one player, because some of these stages, when you look at them, some of these stages are like 95 stages, if you're doing the longest run, which that's a couple of evenings in itself. You might want to encourage the players to try and go above ground, but I suppose it will get them from A to B as fast as possible is the right thing to say. But yeah, it gives the other players something to do and adds a little bit of excitement. But you're also going to get these delving encounters. So at the end of each of the stage, you're going to re-roll in a D10. And 2d10, and and depending on what you roll will determine some things that happen in the encounters. Underground combat. As you'd imagine, fighting underground is going to be a little bit difficult because it is very contained, claustrophobic. Not claustrophobic for dwarfs, but if you get what I mean, it's harder to swing sort of big two-handed weapons depending on the size of the tunnels. And there are chances for things like the integrity of the tunnel actually collapsing and unstable, because as players start swinging, they might end up just hitting the side walls or the ceiling or the floor instead. There's rules here for visibility, because if it's not illuminated or the player characters don't have any form of night vision, it's going to be very hard to fight underground. And you've got rules, as you'd imagine, in Cubicle 7's Warhammer Fantasy, that there are specific rules for different types of illumination, so lamps, things like that, as well as rules and penalties for if you're further back in the if the person holding the torch is 5 places further down the party, person right at the front is going to struggle to be able to see in the dark. Chapter 4 covers the Dwarven realms between adventures. So this is your actual heading towards the proper downtime endeavors. Okay, again, you can see my confusion. Chapter previously, endeavors for traveling, and now we've got endeavors for downtime. It's simple enough. Personally, different words. So if they are ever in a Karak, then you've got a D100 roll here for different things that can go on. And then, even things like they can have big festivals and feasts there, or some tunnelers may have found a new tunnel to a new part that might need to go, be investigated or looked after. The new endeavours, so these are your actual downtime endeavours for the players, and they can advance the underground tunnel. So just again, flicking back to these new tunnels that found, they can go and find new tunnels, add illumination, variety of them. They can brew additional batches of puns and poisons, etc. Concoction Drakefire, which is always fun. Consult the archives, which I don't think many players will probably do a research. Unless obviously, again, it's one of the magical classes. Customize some trappings, forge a rune, or swear an oath and become a Death Slayer, which is a very interesting section, because I may have mentioned before that I think Slayers are fun. I don't want one in my adventure, but as a class occupation, sorry, they are very interesting. They're not that bad as if you're a games master. They can just be a little bit, because they're one dimensional, just trying to die in glory. Chapter 5 then will take you through campaign ideas. So I reckon there's probably, with all the hooks, 80 to 100 adventure and campaign ideas. So so if you look at sort of politics or trade, each one of these is giving you 3 ideas of hooks to start, and then we've got Dwarven specific ones coming out of different Karaks as well. The Underway, so this is one of the places that sort of links variety of Karaks together. Again, we've got some adventure ideas to go into here. Dwarves and the Empire, so these are sort of 4 specific Dwarven adventure ideas that will come out. So protecting the secret guild, so this is for the Imperial people are very prone to stealing Dwarven engineering ideas, and then they may have found, that the dwarves have found that someone on Tilia is designed, they've gone with some big cannon and they'll go, hold on, we created that. So they'll go and investigate it. So yeah, that's 4 very specific ones, including going against the High Elves, because obviously dwarves and elves in this don't get on, and they have grudges, which leads me on perfectly, great segue there, into the grudges section. Now, the Dwarf Player Guide does some wonderful things with the grudges, because grudges now become more of the personal quest if you are a dwarf. So you don't have your short and long-term quests. You get a book of grudges. So if someone annoys you, the name goes in the book of grudges. And when you resolve that grudge, and there are rules for resolving the grudges, be that killing the person, telling them they're wrong, and it doesn't always end in death. Say that there's more stuff on grudges, because obviously grudges can really drive especially a very stubborn dwarf out there. Oaths as well. So oaths are another big part that's covered in the Dwarfs Player's Guide. One of the things I'm going to cover when I come towards the end of the book is there's an awful lot in here that you kind of need another book to have more detail on. You could have. I'll save that till the end, and then we've got some Slayer specific stuff as well as some. What's coming up next? I think it's 6 NPCs that are interesting that you can build campaign and campaign ideas around. So we've got the 3rd Slayer in the book, and Felix, which is the guy that hangs around with him. He's got this sort of Wookiee death pledge. So Gortrex has saved Felix, and now Felix is just hanging around trying to resolve this oath with Gortrex. But all Gortrex is trying to do is get himself killed because he's a Slayer. It's a really interesting sort of dynamic. These two, I'm convinced there are books about as well. Let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there are Gortrex and Felix books. That's what I have in my head. We then got this Gorga, which is a orc type creature, which is nasty. So again, just details where they're going to be and how long they've existed for, and then just how the players will have to interact with them. And they have replaceable teeth, which is and descendable jaws, so they can swallow massive prey. When I say massive prey, they don't need massive prey because dwarfs are relatively short, but they can pretty much swallow dwarfs in one go with their descendable jaws, which is good. And if they break the teeth out, they can get new teeth. Dragons, we talked about dragons taking over some of the holds. So we have now got stats for dragons, and one specific dragon here, Hagdar, who is detailed of exactly where he's staying further back, well, earlier in the book, I should say. Again, in one of the lost holds, so if the players do need to go and deal with the magma dragon, which I would encourage the players not to for a while, bearing in mind this creature has 224 wounds. It's going to be quite nasty, and obviously breath of brimstone. And then I think this is some of the nicest art I've ever seen, and the Cubicle 7's art is amazing, but the detail here around this creature's face, the way the green sort of just comes out and the fire in its hand is absolutely amazing. Now, these are rogue idols of Gork or Mork, and these have been created, so they're totems that are raised basically by orcs and goblins. That they will then sort of leave a totem somewhere, and they're big. These are big totems, but they will be left somewhere, and it's normally on a path that the dwarfs will travel through or near. And then they just sort of wake up, and well, nastiness ensues as they try to kill all the local dwarfs. So those are your sort of NPCs that will form campaigns. And then finally, we've got this little campaign here with Skaven that obviously exists. They're on the front cover, and they've got an adventure here. And it's from the clan Morbidius, and there's details here of the other 3 clans for the Skaven clans and how well they get on with them or not. Bit of a detail on the main guy, which is Sitch, and the plot here where he's basically trying to get into sort of poison one of the dwarf Karak Nord. We've got a lot of NPCs in here for other. We've got a fair amount of NPCs here for some more Skaven, as well as details on exactly how the plan's going to go down and the stats for him himself, and then the effects of the situation in here. It's a nice little mini campaign. Then we're going to end with an index that isn't hyperlinked. Okay, coming in at 95 pages, and then the wonderful book here, which is obviously they're amazing sort of limited edition sort of covers on the books, which are stunning. Okay, so right, what do I think of this book? Well, let's just get back to me. 95 pages, so it's become quite standard now with Cubicle 7. We are seeing the 150 page book and the 95 page books, and they are of a similar price. So there is that. I do think initially it slightly overpriced. I thought, coming in at just 100 pages, I thought it might have been slightly cheaper to get hold of. So yeah, I think I'm going to do a couple of the negatives first. There are several things in the book that I find slightly annoying. One's obviously that map, which it's not really legible. There are several things in here, like I said, about the grudges and variety of other stuff. You're going to need to buy the Dwarf Player's Guide to run this effectively. Now, you don't need the Dwarf's Player's Guide if you don't buy this book. That doesn't matter. But the other way round, you're going to have to get, I think, the Dwarf Player's Guide if you want to run this well. I love the fact they both interact perfectly. Because it's only 90 odd pages, the one thing that I am quite surprised on is I think it would have been a bit of a thicker book, but I think I kind of would have liked to seen this in one book and cost more. But I suppose, I don't run a role-playing company, so is it better to sort of drip them out and make them, two books slightly more affordable than what expensive one book? Maybe people wouldn't have bought it if it was a Dwarf's Player's Guide, and this is really a campaign guide for running dwarfs or adventuring in a dwarven area. That hold Carrack-Norn is absolutely amazing. So it annoys me that it's not numbered and it's a little bit hard to find in the text, but it's a really good section, and I now want to see more of some of the other areas for the dwarfs, especially the big one. Carrack would be really good to actually see that with it's 90,000 the High King. It's got some really good stuff in here with the NPCs that are in the book, so I like it. I really like the book. I'm just a little bit on the at £35. Do I think it probably should have come in at 30? Possibly, yeah. But then everything's going up and things, so maybe it's done to cover that. But I'm surprised it's at £35 with how small the book is, but it's still packed. It's a good book. I'm glad I've got it. Will everyone else appreciate it? So I think I'll end with this. If you are planning on playing a dwarf, you can get the Player's Guide. If you're planning on, as a games master, playing the areas of the dwarfs, you need this book. If you have a party of dwarfs, I think you need this book. If you're not doing any of those, and if you're interested in knowing more about the dwarfs and some of the areas, I think you need this book. It's a great lore book and it's great to have. But if you're not doing any of those bits, it's possibly a pass. I don't regret it because I love everything that they bring out, and I love the world. So I get a lot of joy from reading the book and finding out more things. But possibly one of the ones that, if you're not running a massive campaign with dwarfs and stuff, maybe a pass. But overall, it's a good book. If you've enjoyed this, obviously please like, share, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next video. Thank you for watching.